do that. I forgot to make sure I get that so that people know that they can watch it on Facebook, but also some people that aren't able to get onto Facebook for whatever reason, we'll put this onto our YouTube channel as well. So lots of ways of sharing tonight's fun. So while we give Facebook a minute or two to notify people that we're live, I'm going to fill a little bit of airtime, not too much time though, because Janelle, you're joining us from Virginia, is that correct?
Yes.
And then Rachel, you're in Toronto?
Yeah.
So we've got the whole swath of the country
yes,
covered
we do.
with time zone. So we are located, for those that may not be familiar with Warwick's, we're located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. So we're just a little bit north of the downtown area of San Diego. You'll notice my little sign, and people who watch us a lot get tired of me saying this, but it's a big year for us. 1896, we're celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
Awesome.
Big year for us. So, in some of the things that we've talked about over the years with historical fiction authors and things like that, think of the history that Warwick's has seen in that 125 years. I mean, this is our second pandemic.
You guys are old hats at this.
Old hats at this. We survived the 1918 one. We've got the 2021 covered. So. But going through the archives and things, it was really interesting, the things that we found, because we're going to build an online scrapbook and we're doing some fun things like that. And there's some little contests that people, if you're not on our e-blast list, people should get on that, because as we get closer to the fall, we're going to have some fun contests and ways to win gift certificates and stuff from us. But one of the funny things that I saw was that, when ebooks came out, we were all worried, like, the book's going to go away. Well, there was an article that was written by the local La Jolla newspaper that when TV became, they were worried that books were going away with the invention of television. So it's like, there's some old history, and books are still here. So,
they're still here.
And so for tonight, I'm going to be putting Janelle's book, The SWAN, into the comment section of Facebook. So you can easily click on that. I know people are tired of hearing me say this too, but any way there is to get a book, you can get it from Warwick's. But I'm not sure we can ship it up to you up in Canada, though. That's the only issue.
I know.
So anybody watching in Canada, that's bah humbug. Sorry about that.
We're just going to have to go visit San Diego.
There you go. Pick it up in person. And you can always pick it up in
person.
person, too. That's one thing when you do click on that, you can choose to pick up. We love seeing everybody come in the store. Nothing better than shopping books. And we've got the whole other side of the store that's fantastic, too, with great gifts and jewelry and stuff. So if you're in the San Diego area, we'd love to see you. For tonight's event, Janelle and Rachel are going to talk for about 30-ish minutes, and then we're going to bring in questions. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put those into the comment section too, if you're watching us live on Facebook, and I'll bring those into their conversation at that half hour for 35-minute mark. And don't be shy. I always and Rachel, maybe remind people at some point too, if they have any questions, to pop those in. So with that, I think we've given Facebook enough time to let people know we're here. So I'm going to introduce these two lovely ladies and then turn it over to you. So with a passion for heart-stopping adventure and sweeping love stories, Janelle Ceiseilski, did I say it right?
Ceiseilski, yes.
Ceiseilski, go. Close, so close.
That's okay.
Weaves fresh takes into romance of times gone by. We're not creating dashing heroes and heroines and daring heroines. She can be found dreaming of Scotland, indulging in chocolate of any kind. Love that. Or watching old black and white movies. Winner of the Romance Through the Ages Award and the Maggie Award. She is a Florida native who now lives in Virginia with her husband, daughter, and lazy beagle. Well, I guess not all of them are lazy, but it's kind of.
Mine is.
Yeah. She's here today to talk about her latest book, The SWAN. Can't wait. With Janelle today is Rachel McMillan. Rachel is the author of the Harringford and Watts Mysteries, the Van Buren and DeLuca Mysteries, 3/4 Time series, the London Restoration, and the Mozart Code. Her nonfiction works include Dream Plan Go, a travel guide for independent adventure, and a very merry holiday movie guide. Rachel lives in Toronto, Canada, and is always reading, as are we all. So with that, ladies, have a great conversation. We'll see you in about a half hour.
Thank you. Hi, Janelle.
Hi. So good to see you again.
Spoiler alert, Janelle and I know each other.
We do.
I think, from a long time. And now we share a publisher, but we didn't always. We met, I think it was I endorsed one of your early books. I think the Poppy.
What did you? I don't remember.
I don't remember. I
I have
think,
to check.
or I read it at least.
I know. Well, you read everything.
But now we talk about books and heroes we love, and we'll get a little bit more into how Janelle and I are paired up for the foreseeable future later in the conversation.
Yes.
It is delightful to see you virtually again, and
Yes.
congratulations on the Ice Swan. I am seeing it everywhere, including everybody, an amazing review on Smart Bitches Trashy Books today.
Yes.
As I mean, we're all fangirling over this. A shout out tweet from the one and only Jodi Picoult. So
Yes, I just found out about that this afternoon when we were chatting earlier. Somebody was messaging me at the same time, and I think my jaw just hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. So it's been amazing to see the reach that this book is getting, which is all any author really wants.
absolutely, and that gorgeous, gorgeous cover, which I think is one of the best covers I've ever like. Come on, everybody, look at that. You're
Yeah.
allowed to judge books by their covers.
I
We
do.
recommend it because we know how hard our team works on the covers for our
Yeah.
HarperCollins books. Like, that team is amazing.
They
So
are.
did a wonderful job with that. So
Yes.
I have old school on little like notebook. I had like a notebook full of questions for Janelle, but I tone it down. I'm hoping we can get some chats going in the Facebook, and the Facebook Live will, the video will be up on the Warwick's page. And if you have a late question after and you're rewatching this, I'm willing to bet that Janelle will go back in and answer you.
Probably.
She's
Yes.
very accessible. Do not be shy to reach out to her.
No. I love connecting with people. So
She's very nice. Don't be scared. So I was going to start, Janelle, by asking you, because we see the blurbs online and we see people talk about the books in these formal trade reviews. How do you define the reading experience of the Ice Swan?
Oh, I would say it's a combination of history and romance and action and adventure. So if you like any of those things, hopefully you will find them in this book.
And I can attest to you, you're going to find them in all of Janelle's books, and especially here. She is, and we've talked about this before, an unabashed romantic. And I think that we need more of these sweeping love stories, and she has them down to an art form. And you can tell readers that while she's writing, she is infusing all of her favorite things in the world into these books, including my personal favorite trope, which is the marriage of convenience story. So can you tell us, Janelle, what made you decide, for readers uninitiated, there are many different kinds of romance tropes: friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, think Elizabeth and Darcy, think second chance romance, she fell in love with a football star, he went away to Hollywood, and now they meet again 10 years later in a Hallmark movie. There are so many different tropes, but the marriage of convenience trope is when two people are forced to get married so that they can protect themselves or to serve a purpose. And it often leads to some swoony moments. So talk about how the Ice Swan was the perfect vehicle for that trope for you.
So I love this trope as well. It's one of my favorites. Enemies to lovers is also my favorite. For my other stories, I had a more traditional path where they met and they had their issues, and then by the end, they were together. But for each book that I write, I try to have a new challenge for myself. And I had never written a marriage of convenience before. And I thought, I'm going to do it for this one. So I did. And I thought, oh, this will be easy because they'll already be married and I'll get that out of the way. No, it was hard. I think it was almost harder than writing a more traditional, storyline, because, well, now they're married. So now you got to deal with like marriage issues. And I really had to work a different angle with the relationship. But I really liked it because marriage at convenience, they're never these typical, oh, we fell in love and now we're married. No, they've got issues and they're basically strangers when they get married. So you still have to work through all those initial problems that they have, but they're married. So now you got married problems on top of it. And I think it creates a new kind of tension, especially like a sexual tension, because, well, you're married now, so anything goes, but they're not at that point yet. And you gotta get them to that point, so that was really just a challenge for myself to write it into this one. And then the plot helped it because of it was a difficult situation, and they figured, well, the only way we can get out of this is if we're together. So that's how it came about.
They're living in their quote unquote happy ever after, what would usually end the story.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes with all sorts of trust issues and emotional
Yeah.
resonance issues, and they're from two very different worlds. And I want to talk about one of these worlds. Anyone who reads any of your stories knows that Scotland is a heart place for you.
Yes.
You love Scotland. You love Scottish heroes. You love the Scottish landscape. You love to set books in Scotland. You love to set Scotland born heroes other places. We could even, just for a sentence, where are you going on vacation this year, Janelle?
To the Scottish Highland Games.
There's a bit of a motif here, readers, and we see this again in Win. And lest you just want to Jamie Fraser your way through all of your romantic reads, do know that Win in the Ice Swan is not the only Scottish hero you're going to see from Janelle. We've got Barrett in The Socialite. We have Alec in Beauty Among Ruins, which came out in January. And we have the wonderful Win. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about why this particular country and its heroism informs so much of your conceptualization of romance and fairy tales. What is it about Scotland?
I think I just have a romanticized version of this country. It's a very small country, and they have struggled pretty much from the beginning, from the time that they became Scotland, and even before, when they were conquered by the Vikings, and then they were the Picts and the Celts, and the Romans came in and all this stuff, and somehow they still survive. No matter what happens, no matter how many hardships and battles are fought on their ground, they still survive. And they are incredibly proud of their culture. They have a very unique culture. I mean, where else do you go where you eat haggis and listen to bagpipes? That's Scotland. So they are very passionate about who they are, and I love their accents. And if you've ever visited there, the landscape is just phenomenal. I mean, when you see it, you think, oh, this is what romance is, this landscape. It's so barren, and you almost feel like you've stepped back into time because it hasn't changed that much. You can imagine what it was like 200 years ago. And you hear all these stories about the warrior culture that comes out of there. And then particularly with the Battle of Culloden has been very romanticized, and it was a horrible time period and all of that. But these men were fighting to preserve their culture, and they ended up losing. And so that kind of takes on a bit of romanticism, right? We always like the underdog, even when they lose, but they fought so hard to keep it. And I just love that strength and wanting to keep that. And so I love writing about it. And anytime I can get in a mention of Scotland, I'm gonna do it. And I was able to do it here. I mean, he could have been English or anything, but I thought, no, I'm just gonna make him Scottish because I feel like it.
And that inherent stoicism, and that it makes for a wonderful, there is a value system, there is a hardcore passion and pride that comes across in Win in a slightly softer way than some of Janelle's previous heroes. He doesn't have kind of the Beauty and the Beast type archetype of Alec, or Barrett, who is in The Socialite, who trains up resistant fighters and is very worth seeking out. You're just gonna have to buy all of Janelle's.
Yes, please.
They all have pretty covers too. So we have the amazing infusion of this Scottish hero and his history, but we also have just for a little bit of Anastasia fun, we've got the opulence of Imperial Russia that follows Svetlana to Paris. And then for bonus, I mean, basically, reader, if you want any romantic landscape from Scotland to Paris to Russia, they all kind of cumulate in this trifecta of Janelle's got it all. So can you tell us a little bit about those opulent worlds and what tools you use to recreate them so vividly in the Ice Swan?
So when you think of Imperial Russia, you think opulent, you think the palaces, you think the Tsar, you think all of that. And it was a horrible time period when, you know, the nobles had to flee because the Bolsheviks took over, and, you know, the people were revolting against horrible conditions and all this stuff. So they had to leave behind this incredibly rich and, you know, deep culture, and they had to flee to places all over the world. So then many of them ended up in Paris, which has its own culture. But in the Ice Swan, it's not the Paris that we normally think about, you know, where we think Eiffel Tower and we're drinking wine, and, you know, we have all these images of Paris, but this is Paris during the Great War, when you've got refugees coming all in from the countryside and the Germans are bombing them. Paris is under curfew. It's being flooded by the wounded. Their huge hotels are being taken over by the hospitals. And then we end up in Scotland, where, you know, I talk about, oh, this rich culture and landscape, but it too has seen the impact of war. And how are the people now dealing with it? So we see glimpses of an opulence, but it's kind of shrouded in a wartime. So it was a bit different, a different take, I think, and maybe readers aren't used to seeing it that way, which is good because that's how the characters are seeing it. And to create all of this, I mean, I watch a lot of movies because I'm a very visual learner. And so I just take what I see from the screen and just kind of put it in the story, because that's how I see it when I write a book, is I see it as a movie playing in my head. So it just comes out on paper. And I had just finished watching Anastasia on the stage show version.
It's opening again on tour, like now that the pandemic stuff. So people should go and try and see it. It's so good.
It really is. And so that was a fantastic visual to get this feel of Russia, because I'd never written about Russia. I didn't really know anything beyond like the cartoon Anastasia.
That's really good.
I know that's where I got my understanding. And I thought, who are these people? Why are they running? I knew nothing about it. So being able to see this play, it really brought it to life of, you know, the circumstances that these people were coming from. And of course, I read nonfiction books and stuff to help get all the facts and whatnot.
And what I find is interesting is that you're not only setting up a world that's shadowed by war, but you often explore in your characters people of nobility who are losing their way of life. So we've got Kat in The Socialite, who is very much like a Mitford sister over in Paris. Her sister is under the influence of a Nazi boyfriend, and she comes from a very high social background, and she's witnessing the devastation of Paris in the Second World War. So that is kind of that story. And then Alec in Beauty Among Ruins, he is watching his castle and his family's heritage be picked apart one by one. They're selling off their wares and their stores and their antiques. And here we have Svetlana, who is coming from a place where she is an imperial princess, and she is escaping from a life that she was renowned for and loved for, and now she is living in a church basement when she meets Wynne, and never would have associated with someone like Wynne back in her old order. And that leads into something that I found very interesting about this book, is that there is a musicality and artistry to these two characters that shows up in what they do. And so for Wynne, even the way that you describe his passion for the human body. He's a cardiologist. He's a doctor. Cardiology is a relatively new phenomenon, and I'll let you talk about that in a second. But I'll let you listen to me giving for. You're allowed to talk about that, but first answer this, Janelle. So we've got medicine for wind that you actually describe in these very beautiful, almost musical, symphonic terms, and then we have Svetlana. And actually, the Smart Bitches Trashy Books review mentioned this so beautifully. It actually pasted a quote, a paragraph where she was a dancer.
Yes.
And that even though she is not on a grand stage or in the snow globe that is Imperial Russia, she still has the movements and the grace of a dancer. So can you talk a little bit about creating those worlds and then go into cardiology for a second?
So I know nothing about ballet and I know nothing about surgery. So I had to learn a lot, which was very daunting. And I know I got a couple of things wrong with the ballerina stuff, because I actually had a ballerina message me, be like, the couple of those terms you used are not quite correct. Sorry about that. I did my best. But what I do is I have a character and they inhabit a certain world. So for Svetlana, she was a princess and she was also a ballerina, which a lot of people don't realize that the nobles of Russia did a lot of ballet and they performed on the stage, which you wouldn't think, but you can have a princess and a princess who is not part of the royal family. Their titles work a little different than what we're used to with the English ones. So many of them were able to go off and do ballet and they loved it. It was just one of the things that they loved to do. So she's a ballerina. And so she has the mindset of a ballerina. She thinks in ballet terms. Her body naturally adjusts to ballet positions. She sees the world as a dancer would, or at least what I hope a dancer would. And the same for Win. You know, he's a doctor. His whole world is doctoring and surgery and helping people. So of course he's going to look at every circumstance through his unique lens as a doctor. You know, I mean, I'm sure that you as a writer and a reader can look at the world as a writer or a reader would. It's just, I think, a habit that everybody has, whatever your profession or whatever your passion is. That's just how you see the world. And so to understand these characters, that's what I try to do when they're thinking about things. They're seeing it through their own unique lens of whatever it is that they're passionate about. And hopefully that makes them unique and you can understand where their heart's coming from and why they do the things they do and why they see the world a certain way. And it can be difficult because I really wanted to get all those details correct, but
we all try. But I also think that historical fiction is a gateway. It's to entice the readers to want to go and learn more from experts. We try the best we can. But with Win and Svetlana, and I will let you get to cardiology, what I love is that they have, you know, in your romances, the two lovers are not consumed by the romance. For Win and Svetlana, they still have very disparate identities. Mm-hmm. And so part of their marriage and trying to work through this while all the world is crumbling around them is to make sure that they're always kind of forging those two identities to work together. And I think that's really wonderful. And I think that readers should be empowered by that part of the story, that it's not a relationship that swallows the other whole. They are still very much passionate individuals, especially when with this innovative new medical.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Well, I want to comment on what you just said, and then I will get to the surgery, but I think keeping their separate identities is something that I've had to learn in my own marriage, because when I was young, I thought, oh, when you get married, you're just going to be consumed and you're just going to be like the same person. And, you know, when you do get married, you do become one, but it is important to keep your stuff and his stuff. And, you know, you have your own passions, and it keeps you happy and healthy. And then you can come together and it makes you better together because you're doing your thing that makes you happy and his thing. And so I hope that that also translates in the story as well, that, you know, you need to do things outside of each other sometimes to make each other better and your marriage stronger. And I think they did that, that they were able
Complement
to.
each other really well.
I think so.
Doctor and a Scottish doctor and a ballerina.
I know, who would have thought? He just became a surgeon by hapstance, because I was reading The Rose of No Man's Land by Lynn McDonald, which is a fantastic nonfiction book about firsthand accounts of doctors and nurses during the Great War. And I've gotten so many story ideas just from this one book. And so I was reading through it, researching for something else, and it made mention of cardiology and how it was scandalous at the time. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds interesting. And so I had Svetlana first. She was all figured out, and I needed somebody opposite from her. Somebody who was kind of cool and casual, but yet really confident and can kind of put up with her crap, because she brings a lot of issues to the table, but she needed someone strong, but yet calm enough to really balance her out. So I came up with his personality and thought, well, now he needs something to do. I don't want him to be a soldier. I don't want to spy, because I've done all this stuff. So, well, I guess I'll make him a doctor. But I was really intimidated to make a doctor, because I think that's such a specialized field.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really scared to get into that kind of research. And then it was about the same time where I discovered the cardiology thing. And I thought, well, that would be interesting. That would be a really cool historical fact to explore and to tell people about. So that's how he came about, how he became a cardiologist. And because I really wanted people to learn about it. I thought it was cool, so I thought other people would find
and
it
you
cool.
can tell in the book that you think it's cool. And I love that wartime brought out these just like the pandemic has brought out some really interesting new avenues for people. I remember on the news here in Toronto reading about engineers who were suddenly very needed in the medical field because they needed to make something that could store and ship vaccines that need to be stored at a certain temperature. And I'm like, wow, you went to school and now you're saving the world for this cool engineering thing. And the same with Wynn. What I love is that he definitely has, he kind of thaws our ice swan in many ways, to use that cliche.
Yes.
He is very much a medically minded man, but in a time of war, he still very much has that desire to help people. He's always acting under his conviction. And for someone like Svetlana, who's coming from a world with very rigid lines, I think that he's a very new experience for her. And you balance this. Let's just turn this into an Ice Swan fangirl page. You balance this so well between them. But I did want to ask you, as a writer, because we all have these moments, readers, you see the pretty final version. You don't see Janelle and I texting like, oh my gosh, no, I'm never doing
thing ever.
Why do we write these things? What are some of the hurdles that you experienced? Well, I mean, writing Ice Swan during a pandemic is a big one, I'm sure. But also, just in the story, is did you have to backtrack out of a plot point, or did something just not turn out the way that you wanted it to?
Yes. I had difficulty with both of them. I wrote her, I wanted her to be difficult to get to know.
Yeah.
And again, she was another challenge for me. I wanted to write someone who was difficult, and not that she was unkind or unlikable, but you got to work to get to know her. And that was hard, because I had to really balance that, her being snobbish and then having, a warm center once you get to know her, because it was much too easy to just make her all kinds of snobbish. And then thank goodness I had a good editor who was like, no, you need to thaw her out a little bit. And then trying to find a man who could balance that, giving him the right amount of confidence and arrogance while being easygoing. It was a very hard balance. And I had to go back a lot of times and fix it, because apparently they weren't meshing how they were supposed to be. So that was difficult. I had two very strong personalities that I think were doing great if they were by themselves, but when I was trying to get them together, it wasn't quite, there was way too much friction. So thank goodness for editors, because they were able to come in and say, okay, here's what needs to happen and not what you're doing.
Because when the book is playing out in your mind, a lot of editing, for readers who don't know the function of the editor, a lot of it is for them to translate what is in our head from the page to you, the reader, because in our head it all makes sense.
Yes.
And Svetlana and Winter, like, yeah, of course, they're likable. I get them.
Of course, they are.
And that, especially with a story like that, that's a very delicate balance for a romance, that you don't want, you need readers to be on their side individually, but you also need readers to buy them together.
Yeah.
And so I think that you pace that out so brilliantly. And they also are two people uprooted from a different life who are grafting a new life together. And this is quite like the Scottish thing, a major motif in your book. We have, Kat in Paris in The Socialite, and we've got Lily in Beauty Among Ruins, who goes to Scotland from being an American socialite. And then we've got Svetlana, who is one representation of many Russians who found themselves in Paris, and the emigre experience that happened. Can you talk a little bit about where that came from? I think it's going to come from the Broadway stage show Anastasia, but also what that was like, researching that experience of those two different cultures and how people were forced into a new world.
So 3 summers ago, I think I was watching a Russian miniseries called A Road to Calvary. And it was about these two aristocratic Russian sisters. And it starts off, they're involved in the Great War. And then all of a sudden, the Russian Revolution breaks out. And the story follows these two sisters about what happens to them, the changes that comes into their life. They're basically downgraded. And it goes through their struggles and the love that they have to find and the bond together. And it made me think, you know what, I never really knew or even thought about what happened to these Russian nobles. Like, we all know the story of Anastasia and the tragedy of the Romanovs, but I had never given much thought what happened to the rest of the people. And come to find out, many of them were killed because of who they were, because of the support that they gave to the Tsar, and many of them fled. They came to Paris, they came to America, all over the world, anywhere to get away from being hunted down by the Bolsheviks, simply because of who they were and who they had associated with. And I thought that's such an interesting story, because I had never heard it before. And I went to go look for fiction books, because that's what I do when I research. I look at nonfiction and fiction about the storyline, and I think I found maybe 1 or 2 dealing with it. And okay, well, I guess this is the story that I want to write. I want to write about these displaced people. That seems to be my thing, is taking somebody from this place and moving them over here, because it's more dramatic. I don't know why, but it is.
I love.
I know the fish out of water story, I guess, is what I like to do. But I like taking her from Russia and then putting her in this whole other world where she has to figure it out. She's no longer, top dog anymore. She's got to start from the bottom. She's literally living in a basement, selling the family jewels in order to have bread. And then here you have Wynn coming from Scotland. He's from a prosperous family. He's part of the nobility, and he really doesn't want anything to do with it. Surgery is his thing. And then some things happen where his life ends up changing, and the route that he had planned for himself ends up becoming totally different. And so it's a challenge now that both of them are having to face this future that neither one of them had planned for or had been birthed to, really. So I really love that kind of a challenge. And I guess you see it with my other characters too, taking them from this one life they're accustomed to and putting them in this whole other circumstance and figuring it out together. So
Aw. I love that. And I just wanted to ask before we get into, some of the other things I want to wrap up. We'll see again if anyone's just joining. We're happy to take any questions or comments, or else Janelle and I can talk for freaking ever because I have 8 million questions about the ice one. But I did want to know, as writers, we often write many things that do not make it into the book because, editors are like, no, you cannot add another chapter on this one specific esoteric thing you love, or it's just not working out. Was there something about the research that you really desperately wanted to have in the Ice Swan, or a scene or a moment that just didn't make the cut because it just wasn't meshing with your
I
journey?
wanted to spend more time in Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, as it is, it's only the prologue where we're in Russia and then they're gone. I really wanted to explore what it was like to live there and see the palaces and see her in her natural element. But it just didn't happen that way, because if you write historical romance, you need the heroine and the hero to get together. Get them together as fast as you can. So unfortunately, I could not spend as much time in Russia as I wanted to.
The Ice Swan, the sequel,
right?
Silly duck. Just pick another cold word and another bird, and we're good.
Right?
I can definitely, as a fan of Janelle's, as a person and a writer, I can see very much you doing a brilliant job of a completely Russian set story. So I hope that in the future we see that flavor again. I also wanted to ask you what your favorite romantic trope was, but we covered this. So let's marriage of convenience forever. Yeah. And I did want to ask you about, this is great. Timing is perfect because I'm on my last question. Yay. I wanted to ask you, Janelle, as a reader and someone who respects your reading life so much, what are your 3 essential romances that readers should get to know you by?
Oh, okay.
Or just any 3 you love.
Okay. No surprise here. I love Outlander.
No.
I know. I know, right? Never saw that one coming. I do. I was looking years ago, I was looking for a book set in Scotland. And then all these reviews said, oh, you should check out Outlanders. So I did. And there's a lot of things in there that I don't really care for. And I hated it when they moved to America. I wanted them to stay in Scotland.
Go back.
But, I know, but they couldn't.
Pretty.
So I had to reread the first book just so when they're in Scotland. But it's such a wonderful love letter to Scotland. It really is. It's just, she's a fantastic writer. And yes, and it's got fantasy and a hot redhead and kilts, and none of that hurts.
Everything you want out of life.
I know. And right. They call Jamie Fraser the king of men for a reason. So it's perfect. Okay. So my other one is Gone with the Wind, which is not your typical romance. And it took me years until I realized, you know what? That's actually a really good romance, because it doesn't end the way you want it to, but it ends the way that it should. And there's something about that, because she really wants to win him back. Rhett, like, he's a man worth winning, but he's done with her. I don't know. It's just one of those stories that just sticks with me. And she's not your typical heroine. And for the longest time, I didn't like that, because I liked your more straight line kind of heroines. But now as I'm getting older, I like the ones who kind of buck the trend. And she definitely does. She blazes her own trails. So Gone with the Wind for the second one. And my last one is The Ghost of Mrs. Muir.
Oh.
I love that story. It started off as a play, and it became a black and white movie with Rex Harrison, who was just dreamy in it. And he's a ghost, and she comes to live in his house. And it's like an enemies to lovers kind of story. And it's so romantic. They never touch the entire story. They never touch because he's a ghost. And then at the very end, it's the most romantic thing you have ever seen. And oh my goodness.
I love it. And I'll just turn back to Julie, but before I do, Janelle and I and our friend Amy Runyon are doing a with HarperCollins next year. The two of us and Amy are working together on a story that is Scottish and romantic and set in a Yorkshire castle across 3 different wars: the Boer War, the Great War, which Janelle is talking about, and just after the post-World War II, which I am going to be covering. So readers get a little bit of Rachel, a little bit of Janelle, and a little bit of Amy all together in a sprawling epic. So I'm excited that I get to play with some of this Scotland and Yorkshire love with you. Thank you.
Yes.
So much, Janelle.
In this crumbling old castle. It'll be perfect.
Oh, so great. Oh my God, there's so many things to, I mean, we could keep going and talking on so many different things here. And there's so many great comments that are coming in too, because I mean, everybody loves the Ghost of Mrs. Muir too. I mean, everybody's loving that. I remember do you remember the TV show? Now I'm old enough that I actually remember.
I've never watched it, but I've heard of it.
I actually watched it when it was like, so that's how old I am. And I loved it. It was so good. The TV show was fantastic too. So that was really fun. And I have to ask, is David Tennant now your like favorite Scottish actor? Because I just am in love with him after Broadchurch.
I love him.
Love him. He's like, I mean, he's not your typical.
He's not.
Like kind of romantic kind of, but it's like, I'm obsessed with him now.
He has a very good accent.
He really does.
Great accent, and just got that kind of, I don't know, it's just got something about him.
He's adorable. Yeah.
Definitely got it. But there's no, I remember, this shows my age too, back to Outlander. I read that in the 90s when it came out. So that's showing you my age. But I mean, my neighbor and I were just, this was before like all the sequels. So it was like the first one out. And Jamie, we were just like our poor husbands.
Like Jamie.
There is nothing like Jamie, especially in that first book. There is nothing like Jamie.
Yes.
And okay, so everybody's excited for the 3 of you guys together too. So here's a question though from Ruth, and she says 2021 has spoiled me with the release of 2 Janelle books. Any spoilers besides the group thing? Any spoilers for what the future holds?
Yes, I'm working on another story right now. It's a duology. I haven't made the official announcement about it yet, but that will be coming up soon. And it's basically, last year I was watching way too many Marvel movies, particularly the Captain America ones, because Chris Evans. And I thought, you know what would happen if the Winter Soldier fell in love? So that's what it is.
There you go.
And it'll be coming out next spring sometime.
Okay.
And also set during the Great War, right?
Yes, during the Great War, and it's got secret societies and occults and Russia and Dracula and assassins. It's like Avengers meets Indiana Jones with a lot of romance.
Love it. Love it. Just so good. And I love what you were talking, what both of you were talking about earlier, is that, you know, you try so hard to get all the details right. And I'm going back to the thing that you said about the ballerinas. It's like, there's readers out there that are going to constantly like find that thing, but you know what, you're here to entertain us and to, you know, and you're writing fiction, and it's like, you know, everybody give us a little bit of a break here.
We do our best. I mean, every historical writer I know does their absolute best to research, because most of us, that's our favorite part of the process, is the reason, and we do our best, but at the end of the day, we write fiction.
Exactly.
So,
and it's to entertain. I mean, that's kind of the thing, like during the whole pandemic when we were doing this, it was just like, oh, you know, should we continue doing this? It's this horrible thing, but it's like, you know what, coming to everybody through Zoom and through Facebook, it was so, just to entertain people for a few minutes just felt so good. And that's what books do. And it's like, we're just here to entertain people.
Yes.
And to, you know, hopefully educate. And like you said, Rachel, you know, hopefully go down some googly rabbit holes that you know, can like learn some things. But the bottom line is we're here to entertain.
Exactly.
Everybody.
Exactly.
Well, with that, you'll love the comments. So go back on the Facebook page and look at all the comments. There's some great ones in there. But we're going to wrap it up now. So Rachel, tell people where, are you working on a solo project?
Yeah, so I have my next book is called The Mozart Code, and it comes out in January 2022 with HarperCollins.
I'm so excited.
A marriage of convenience set in post-war Vienna and Prague. Just as the Cold War is brewing, the Iron Curtain is about to fall, and the entire part of this romance balances on the discovery of Mozart's death mask in a pawn shop in Vienna. So that's my next solo project besides what I'm working on with Janelle and Amy. So yay!
Sounds great. And where should people go to find? Do you have a website that you can direct people to, like, get your social media?
Probably send people to my social media. You can find me anywhere online with the handle @RachKMick, RACHKAMC. I'm on Instagram, Twitter. I'm always talking about the books I'm reading. So please
always. And she has fantastic recommendations. Like I always get whatever book she's reading. So.
I love that, because the thing is that, and this is what, we're always like, and Janelle, I'm going to ask you this question. It's always like, you've just finished this book, but everybody wants to know what the next book is, right? It's like, wait, we just finished it, but we read faster than you guys can write. So we need all those good recommendations. So Janelle, where would you like to send people to find out what you're doing?
My website is the easiest. It's Ceiseilski.com. And on there, you can sign up for my newsletter. You can find links to my different social media places. So that's kind of your one stop for everything right there.
Perfect. Well, ladies, this has been fantastic. What a great conversation. So wonderful to host you. Hopefully if anything brings you to the West Coast, we'd love to see you at the store.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
And maybe we'll see you again when the next releases come out. If not at the store, we'll see you on this in this virtual world that we have.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. With that, I'm going to tell everybody good night. Thank you, everybody. This will be on, if you missed any of it, it'll, like Rachel said, it will stay on Facebook. You can click the link to order the book, and it'll also be on our YouTube channel. So good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.